Hey, it's Johnny Potenza, aka Johnny P, and you're watching Italian Sicilians Do It Better.
What's going on, everyone? We're back with another episode. Today is a little something different. We have a wise guy, an actor, a late night show host, a wise guy. Is it a wise guy, Marcus? Is that what he said?
I would consider him one. Yeah, why not?
Welcome, everybody. Johnny Potenza.
Hey, how's it going?
How's everything, Johnny? Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Let me correct you. I'm not a wise guy. They used to call me, my old producer in my band used to call me the wise guy of rock and roll because I used to have a wise guy persona, but I'm a New Yorker. What do you want?
We're all like that. We all got a fucking.
So because you're a New Yorker, you got the name wise guy.
You can't be a New Yorker unless you're a little bit wise or a wise guy. So
talk to us. Like I see you do a lot of things, and you've done a lot of things in the past.
Yes.
But let's start with the music career.
Okay, cool.
When did you know that that's what you were looking to pursue, and what kind of an instrument was your go-to?
Well, I'm a drummer at heart, and I know how to play guitar, but I wouldn't call myself a guitar player. But I was into music since I've been 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, and then my first band that I really loved was Kiss, and my father took me to see my first Kiss concert when I was 10 years old at Madison Square Garden. Nice. I went to see Kiss on December 16, 1977, okay? That was the Love Gun tour. That's when Kiss blew up. I always knew I wanted to be a musician, but once I saw that, I knew I wanted to be a drummer. And I was 10 years old. So, and then I told my father, I want to play the drums. And he bought property in Staten Island. We were going to move to Staten Island a couple years later. He says, once we move to Staten Island and you still want to play, we'll send you to go get some drum lessons. So that's what happened. Once we moved to Staten Island, I was bothering him, and then he signed me up to a music store, and then took a couple lessons, couple of months, and got a drum set. And then a couple of years later, started playing with different musicians in the neighborhood. And at that time, the drinking age was 18 years old.
Oh, so it was party time.
Damn.
Yeah, so I was playing bars at 15 with guys who were 18 and 19. So it was great, and I had a great time. And my father used to lend us the van, okay, because all the guys in the group were going to be cops or firemen. They were taking the test. My father was a fireman, retired New York City fireman and old-time plasterer. So he would give us, without my mother knowing, because she would have flipped out, he used to give us the van to use, and no one had licenses.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so like one of the guys drove, but they drank, and I really wasn't a drinker, so I would drive. Coming home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. It was great. I was like the king of the hill, or king of the block, whatever you call it. But yeah. And then as time went on, graduated high school, got caught in the whole street thing, partying, good time, getting into trouble, and that lasted about 3-4 years. And then after getting
You mean went to college?
Went to college, yeah. I never did no serious time. I did 30 days in Rikers Island. That was enough to wake me up. I mean, it made me a better criminal. No, I'm just teasing.
Rikers is crazy, though, even for 30 days back then.
And I was in August when it was it was like, forget about it.
No air conditionings?
No air condition. And so I remember some guy took my Walkman in the middle of the night when it was on my head. And I woke up and my headphones weren't there, so I was still coming down, and I went crazy, and I wound up finding my headset. What were they called?
Walkmans, no?
Walkmans back then, with the cassette and all that shit. So I wound up getting it back because I was going to fight the guy, and then that was it. I came out and I got a band back together, got away from my old crowd, and I just went full force in the music business, nonstop. And then we went up opening for a lot of big acts, opening band,
Did you tour the country or
we didn't tour? We toured the United States, but like mainly the East Coast and then the West Coast. That was it. And opened up from like ex-members from Kiss and Guns N' Roses and Twisted Sister and
That's pretty cool,
a bunch of these bands, yeah. And I actually got to open up for my idols from Kiss, Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, because when the band broke up, they were solo touring. And then I opened up for them a couple of times, got close with them, and then Kiss got back together, and '96 when they put their makeup on again and they toured the world and took everything over. And then was in a band Barrage, was all originals. 5 years that broke up. Then I was with a band called NYB, parentheses, none of your business. That was the name of the band.
That's pretty cool.
I like that.
Yes, thank you. That was my attitude. They would be like, what's the name of your band? I'd be like, none of your business, you know.
And then right off the jump, you start a fist fight.
Yeah, so we had a guy his name is Richie Scarlett. He's an unsung hero. He was a guitar player who never made it to the big time, but he played backup guitar in all the major bands, like for Ace Frehley from Kiss and like Sebastian Bach from Skid Row.
Okay.
Leslie West from Mountain, Mississippi Queen, all those guys. But we opened up for Ace Frehley. He was playing with Ace Frehley, and he saw my band, and we were talking. We got friendly, and he's like, "What's your plans?" I go, "We want to come out with an album, but we don't know how to do it." He goes, "Well, I produce local bands," so he gave me his number. We started talking. Then he, within less than 6 months, we were in the recording studio.
What was the feeling of that?
It was great. It was great. Once my father always, I worked with my father. I worked when I wanted to work because I wanted to pursue the music business. And if you're going to pursue anything like that, acting at an early age, you have to live, eat, and shit it. You can't just do it half-ass because it'll never work. Now, I mean, with the platforms now that your generation and the younger kids have, like a platform like this, it's easier. You guys could do it any time of the day, morning, noon, and night, which right. Puts into your schedule. We didn't have that back in the day, you know. So I worked with my dad, made a lot of money when I worked, and I would do the business with the music business. And then I opened up my own record label, and I know you guys are going to appreciate that. It was called Shinebox Records. I'm not even lying to you.
You say that in a sentence to somebody, it's definitely a fight.
None of your business, you know, and the Shinebox record. Yeah, go get your Shinebox record.
Right.
When I met Frank Vincent, I told him that, you know, when I met him at the Chiller Expo, I got an interview with him, and I said, I even opened up a record label after Shinebox Records. He's like, get out of here, kid. I go, yeah. I go, it calls Shinebox Records. He goes, that's great. And then that was it. You know, I tried to get him to do a plug, but he wouldn't do it. But he did do a plug for the show.
Oh, nice.
He said something about a copyright thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so my father would always tell me, what are you going to do with your life going to work? Every day. I go, I'm going to be a rock star. He goes, no, but I mean, what are you going to do? I go, I'm going to be a rock star. I go, well, you got to have a backup. You got to get a signature. Every day I heard this.
You need the union.
Every day.
The union.
Once Richie came into my life and he met my dad and they kind of clicked, and he saw me open up for my Peter Chris H. Free, like idols of mine and my band, and he took me to see. Then he started thinking, saying, maybe this kid might have a shot. So then my father gave me his 110% support. He actually...
he understood it.
He understood it. But him and Richie never had a father, and they both loved the Yankees. So right there, and they were like diehard Yankee fans. So right there, from him working with me, from the Yankees, from him being, because Richie's a gentleman, and he's half Italian, half Irish, that was it. He goes, whatever you need. And then he actually gave me a gift, and he incorporated the record company for me and got me legit.
Nice.
Oh, wow. And
we started it, and we were doing it, and it came out with an EP, and then we started touring. And then he started touring again. So the full album, the second album we were putting out, took 5 years to put out because of his touring schedule. And our guitar player had a drug problem.
Oh, no.
Not rock and rollers, but yeah. So he was in and out of the band. We threw him out about 3 times. 2 times during the recording sessions. So between that and that, so by the time we came out with our album, the full length, we kind of missed the boat in that genre of record label signing, say. Late 90s, hip-hop was blowing up the industry.
Yeah.
They weren't even looking at rock bands anymore.
Hip-hop was taking over for that.
It was taking over. Then once 2000 came, that was it. In 96, I met with me and one of my manager at the time, Tom McCoy, and this guy Glenn G from Vegas, who used to work with Guns N' Roses. He started with them. We went to mostly every record company in New York City and L.A. a bunch of different times. Piles of bands with great music and bins, and just they weren't signing anybody. And then we got a couple of spec deals where we could have played to pay on a tour. It would have cost a lot of money though. You know, at that time, like $2 million was like 350,000 to like 500,000 to buy like on a 4 to 5 week tour with a major band that you're not even going to get paid, but you'll get to open up for them and get the promotion out of it and sell your merchandise there. But we couldn't raise the money for that because so you're looking at 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, 2004, band broke up in 05. You're looking at say 2000. What do you think $100,000 worth then to now? A double and a half, probably.
Probably.
At least
You should have just sold a kidney and
yeah. So we missed the boat with the record deal. We kept playing, and then the band just after 10 years it fell apart. And then at that time, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. It was one big depression. I was depressed.
Now let's go back though. Your father gave you the 105. Now you crashed. What was he saying?
The 105.
I mean, he gave you the 105% that he
Yes.
was all in supporting you.
No, but then he said you give it. You know, he said, listen, you gave it the college try. Now you got to get your ass moving. And so I just went back to plastering and painting full time.
Yeah.
I could have went full time with him in the business when I was 30, and I turned it down. I just wasn't in my DNA. I wasn't a 9-to-5er.
Right.
You know, I wasn't a 9-to-5. I never lasted on a job too long. I always left.
There's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody is a 9-to-5er.
No.
You know, but
No.
so I'm guessing at this point you found something else because I noticed that you were also in some films.
Yeah,
One of them called Jersey Shore Massacre.
yeah, that was cool. And I'm not an actor, far from it. Did some acting classes. I wouldn't even call myself an actor, but all of those little parts that I got, or those little cameos, were all from the show. Directors that I met, like The Irishman, I had a couple of cameo day player scenes, not speaking, but I was wise guy number 3. They named me, but
Is that when they put the tape on your jackets, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I was there at a certain point, and I noticed that everybody, including bartenders, had bartender 1, wise guy 3, like everyone was
Yeah.
just labeled.
I remember when I went there and they said, your trailer number 3. I'm like, there must be a mistake. I go, I'm just here to do whatever. He goes, no, that's your trailer. And I go, can't be. Because I never got a trailer in my life. You know, so I was all excited. I got a trailer. I was with Patrick Borriello, if you ever heard of him.
Sounds familiar.
He was the, who did he play? He played Young Slick on the Bronx Tale. With Lilo and Joe D'Onofrio and Lou Venaria. I know all of those guys. Well, that's how I met Patrick Borriello, because he was wise guy number 2 or number 4, and I met him somewhere else before that. I forgot. I think I met him. Oh, that's where I met him. I met him on the first somewhere with William DeMeo because he was Willie's friend, you know, and I met a lot of all these guys I met through the show, which is great. Like, you know, so carry on where we were, because then we can get to where that is, because then now we're jumping ahead of ourselves.
I just couldn't wait to hear the action part of the acting.
Yeah, I mean, I started the Late Night with Johnny P show in 2008, because it's going back was 1997 when I was with NYB. I joined public access television because we used to have public access stations film us. And I go, man, I could really capitalize on this if I could get my show on the air all the time. So I asked some guy, and he goes, just go get certified. So I got certified at public access television. And I started, then once you get in, if you want a series, that's the only way you're going to get your stuff aired all the time. So I started a show called The Gangsters of Rock, like I was telling you. It was like a underground Wayne's World, filmed in my basement, because my whole basement had all Kiss collectibles and all rock and roll and gangster memorabilia all over the walls. So I had it pretty much almost like this with a desk in the middle. So I sat here, and it was cool. We set up cameras. And then we would film outside bands, or since I had the record label, I used to get the promos from the record label, audio case, to air bootleg concerts. So that's what I did. And then my producer named me. He goes, hey, Richie Scarlett talks like this. He goes, Johnny, he goes, you're a wise guy. I'm going to name you the wise guy of rock and roll. So then it kind of stuck. And then I wound up produced by the wise guy of rock and roll, Johnny P. Like, I didn't give a shit back then. I wouldn't do it now.
Right.
Because I just wouldn't. I was really, I don't know what the word was, obnoxious. We were like the Motley Crue of Staten Island. You know,
It was a good time.
Great time. I wouldn't, even though at the end I spent all the money I had in my bank. I started all over again from scratch, maybe with a couple of $1,000 left in the bank. I tell people this for people could see what the sacrifice is. And 6 months later, that's when I met Michelle, okay, my wife. And thank God for her, because I was going back down to where I was almost 20 years old again, because I was depressed and I wanted to go see my old friends and forget about my problems and drink. And, she came along. God sent them into my life for a reason. And that's it. I just picked up the pieces, started having a great life, different chapter. And then I started the late night show in 2008. And I went in just to do it as a gig. And then after a couple of shows, you remember Vinny Vella?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I met him. I worked with him.
Great guy, sweet guy. And he was like the first semi-name that came on the show. And then after him, Vinny Pastor was like the biggest name I had. I had all the local people coming on. And like C actors and comedians. And once Vinny came on, because I met Vinny on Staten Island through some my friends where you guys got to get on, Frankie DiMatteo and Nick Christophers. Frankie DiMatteo, the editor-in-chief of Mob Candy magazine. It only lasted for a little while. And they just started releasing a couple more. It was... Did they stop doing it probably like in 2016 or 17? So they used to have Mob Candy events. So they had all the wise guys like Amanda Sante and everybody. Frank Vincent was on the covers. When I see his next time, I got extra copies because I'm nuts like that. I save all the shit. I got shit at the house that I should belong. I'm like, what am I doing with all this stuff?
It's good memories.
Yeah, that's why I brought you one of those papers before.
Oh, we got to talk about that later.
Show that. That's the best. You could ask me which ones I dated on there. And I actually dated one of their mothers.
Jesus.
So I'm guessing it was all six.
I hope it wasn't at the same time.
No. But, and then once Vinny Pastor came on the show, that opened up all kinds of doors for me with all these actors. So I started bringing on everybody. Anybody, not the John Travoltas or the George Clooney's. We can't get those guys yet. Eventually. But anybody that the late night shows, I say, because this is how it is, late night shows and talk shows that are coming on national television do not take no one that's not in a major motion picture film or on a hit TV series. So Sopranos was the biggest show on television at one point. And it's down in history that's as that type of show. It's the best grossing show. But they won't put any Sopranos on the show. On Jimmy Fallon's not going to bring on, I'm not going to say any of their names because they're my friends. Sure. Anybody that's not currently, you could be current doing independent films up the ass. But like say that they'll bring on Edie Falco because she's current. She's doing shit. Michael Imperelli, it says his name.
Imperelli, yeah.
They'll bring him on because he's doing big series. Steven Sharippa, he's in Blue Bloods. Huge show. He gets on there. But to me, I think it's not fair that they should limit it to people that are already been stars. People, the public, and even myself still want to see those guys come on the show. You know what I'm saying? And so I get all the guys that they don't get. So I'm in the middle. And it's a juggling act booking, the booking game. But I got it down to a science now. You got to have a lot of patience to do it. So who are you trying to get for next month? You might not get them for 2 years. Sometimes 3 years, or sometimes 6 months or a year. You just got to give them the space and just put them on the book. It's just like anything else. And then once it started going off, I said, fuck it. Maybe this is something I might want to do. And then I said, yeah, I would love to be a late night talk show host, not a talk show host, late night. Because a late night talk show host to me is like Johnny Carson, something that,
more loose.
Yes. It wasn't never about being famous for me or having the money. The money, yeah. But doing something that I love to do. Because then I can incorporate the music to it. Since I'm a drummer, like my show now, like any bands that come on, I call it a shakedown. If you got a band and you're coming on my show, we talk. I say, listen, you do 2 songs and I do a song with you, so we do 3 songs. And most of the time they say, yeah. Every now and then they say, well, we don't let no one play, or you can't come on the show then. I go, it's part of the format that I get up and play. It's part of the show.
Right.
So then that's what I do. With the late night show, I only did that every now and then. And then once I started the new show, and everyone said, you got to be on the drums, every band that comes on here. So I said, you're right. Because essentially, if I'm not with a band, because people say, you know how people are, say you were a professional skateboard rider. Does Frank still ride skateboard? Okay, skateboards, he's done. He don't do it no more. He hurt his foot. Yeah. By the way, what's with that fucking bandage on it? That bandage is bigger than your fucking head.
I shoved it in his ass before you got here. I had to package it up.
What line is that movie from?
Oh man.
What did I say? What line is that? What movie is that line from?
Right. Which one?
That's easy. Hey, Spider.
Yeah.
That fucking bandage is bigger than your fucking head.
Goodfellas.
Yeah. How many times have you seen Goodfellas?
Anytime it's on, it's just something that you get stuck to watching.
Yeah.
I got corrupted with all those movies. I think that's what, Goodfellas, I must have seen it about 50 times since 1990. You got to remember, that's a long time.
Yeah.
What is that? 34 years?
If not.
Yeah, 90.
It's almost my age.
34 years.
But I wanted to go back to a question that you had before because it had a great point. Like a lot of these talk show hosts today won't put on someone that's not active.
Yeah.
I agree with that. They do that.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that something simple as Dancing with the Stars.
Yes.
They've brought back some people that no one forgot about. Like,
yes.
What's his name?
Eric Roberts was just on.
Him. Alfonso from Will Smith.
Yeah.
And now he's back. He's doing his own things. And
those guys are great,
Yeah.
So it did revive some of them. It did help some of those people.
Yeah.
So I don't see how it would hurt, but I could understand.
Because they're not in the limelight. That's the problem. They're not in the limelight right now. So they want current people. They want, oh, look, they're big. Let's make it bigger.
But
we want the attraction.
When we were talking offline before,
yeah,
it's like, why wouldn't you help someone that has the potential, but instead you wait for the someone who already is at the potential, but at that point,
because there's no money in it.
Yeah, but at that point for me, it's like, I tried you, I'm not interested now. Right. That's how I would react to it.
I look at it like this. Say like the Brady Bunch, for instance, okay? You had Barry Williams, I think he was dancing, but you get a show like that that's a nostalgic show. Even though it's not in this generation, they still play it every day. There's a lot of people that would love to see all these people on the show. Only one. I mean, there's too many politics these days, and there's always politics in Hollywood and show business. But now, since we're like the economy of people, of more nationalities and ethics and religions that are now, it just grew like this in like the last 30 years. It's crazy. Is overwhelmed with talent, and now you could find the next Beyonce or the next Britney Spears online to TikTok or something. Like if I had this when I had the record label back in the day, it would have been like it would have been like a playing field for talent. And all of these shows that are about America's Got Talent, American Idol. We didn't have all that growing up. There was like in the 70s, there was like back when our fathers, there was American Bandstand, Dick Clark. Then in the 70s, and you Ed Sullivan Show and all that crap. Then in the 70s, you had, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Yeah.
It was on every Friday night. You seen every great band and so on and so forth. Now you got all these shows that make and break people. And it's harder. There's more of a variety of people, as I was saying, that goes back to why don't they have these people on? You see Oprah Winfrey, but Oprah, God bless her, richest woman around, but she could pick and choose. She could pick anybody from anywhere just to put them on the show, and they're going to support her.
But it feels like 9 times out of 10, when you're finding these people, like you said, on these platforms, TikTok, Instagram, you're finding these talents. A lot of the times, they're a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
And that's it. They burn out quick.
Yeah.
So it's like you really need to find who has that talent, that potential, and they ride it through. It's easy to find somebody I could find on Instagram and laugh my ass off and just say, hey, whatever, this guy's great. Yeah, but he's great for the moment.
Yeah.
He's good in front of the camera.
Do you feel the saturation of the social media? Yeah, it's easy to get exposure. Do you think it also hurt potential people who have talent?
the thing is, what I see now, and it's against nobody that's out there. God bless you for what you're doing now, but like back in the day, you had to go for lessons to learn an instrument. Now you could go on YouTube, and that's cool. People who can't afford it, they get to do whatever they want. But I feel like with social media, it does. I don't know.
It's a tricky.
It's a weird world.
It's a crapshoot. It's a roll of the dice. It's influence, for instance. It's like if you know how to speak well and this and that. The world of the younger generation now that I see, because I don't have kids, but I watch every generation and I see it, and because I try to stay with the Joneses and everything. Mm-hmm. But it seems like they're in a lost generation, and they don't know how to socialize without their phone. Like when I drive by a school now, 99 out of 100 people are like this walking. When I was in school, we had the hot rods, we had hot, the kids are all good looking these days. Every generation has good looking people, but back then people were socializing. We would go out afterwards. All the kids that I know, most of them are in the house. They're on the computer.
It was true FaceTime.
It's crazy. It's like if I would go nuts if I had kids that were like that weren't paying attention to me. I'd have them locked in the basement on a chair, and I would spoon feed them. I would, and I would have to sit there and talk to them like this. So they'd be like this. So how was your day today? I commend all the parents out there. It's harder than ever. I mean, my parents had it tough with me, and I had great parents. They were a little too old school, strict. The belt.
Mm-hmm. They were born here?
Yeah. The belt, the wooden spoons. My mother could have had stock, her own business with spoons, with all the spoons she broke. My mother was brutal. Like, she was the greatest, though. But like, that was what they did.
That's how they learn.
You can't even hit a kid now.
No.
You can't even yell at him. You can't even stare at him.
You can't yell at him. Can't do nothing.
I even told him, like, if you were my kid, I'd kick you in the ass. I'd crack you. And you'll call the cops. Well, good. You go to jail and come out, and I'll still kick you in the ass.
Like one of those comedians says, good, call the cops. It's going to take them about 20 minutes to get here. And before that time, I'm going to fucking murder you.
Exactly. I don't mean to sound like a tough guy, but, you have to have some kind of discipline.
I agree.
And I feel like nowadays there's like little to none. You go to the grocery store, you go to any kind of store, you see the kids running around yanking shit off the shelves, saying fuck you to the parents. I'm like, whoa, we got some balls here. Wow, this is crazy.
Unfortunately, the younger generation now, a lot of them that do work in retail, if they don't have their phone, they're lost. Like if I remember when I was in Starbucks a couple of months ago, like, I don't know, I think the thing was like $4, say it's $4.27, and I gave the guy $10.27. So like he was like,
"Why you give me extra money?"
He didn't know what I was doing, and he gave me like more money and change. I'm like, "What are you doing?" I go, "Listen, you were supposed to just give me $6 back." I go,
yeah.
Let's go back to where we were before.
Sorry, we got carried away.
No, that's fine. No, we don't carry it away. It's good. Where were we? Something about the B-listers, I guess. What would you call a lister that say like someone that was big once before, and that say doing just independent movies now? B-listers, C-listers.
I would say C.
Yeah, people say C. Who would you consider a B-lister?
A B-lister would be someone that I haven't seen in a major motion picture, but in a lot of like cable TV shows.
Or what about like a Donnie Wahlberg on Blue Bloods?
I don't think he's an A actor.
I don't think he's A.
No, he's not an A like a Mark Wahlberg.
I think he would be like a B.
A B.
Maybe C.
Not a C, a B because of the show. Don't matter how good or bad of an actor he is. I think he does good in his role what he plays. So when I see him do this, what was he in the Backstreet Boys, or what was the other band?
Donnie?
Yeah. New Kids on the Block? Which one?
I don't know.
New Kids on the Block.
Yeah, he was in New Kids. So when I see him singing New Kids now, I'm like,
you fucking psycho?
Yeah, it's like, because the boy band to me, after a while, it's a boy band. Now you got to come out with a new album. But you know what? These guys go on world tours and they make zillions of dollars. And God bless and salute. I wish I had one song, one hit wonder. They make fun of people. Mm-hmm. But anyone with a one hit wonder makes a lot of money every year. They still get a couple $100,000.
Yeah, from the
royalties from publishing rights with like BMI or ASCAP. I'm on the BMI. I have a publishing company for any artist or myself, but at the end of the day, it doesn't pay my bills, you know. But it's good to have, you know. So yeah. I mean, the late night show I did to 10 seasons, and then I retired it, and I took a couple of years off because my wife Michelle, she passed away due to breast cancer, and I needed time to heal and to grieve. And then I came back. I wanted to give it a break anyway and change the name, so I came back 2 years later with Up Late with Johnny Potenza, and then it took me a little time to get back into it. And then we got shut down with COVID for 18 months. Then we started up again a couple months. Then we got shut down another 6 months. So then, since then, I've been going full force with it. Ever since we came back, we lost a third of our crew. So it's been a grind. It's a lot to do with a public access late night show. It's a lot because you have there's 3 cameras. We had a public relation lady who got sick. She got cancer. I have a makeup artist, 3 camera people, floor director, some assistants, and you got a director that runs the board, a lighting guy, and a sound engineer. So it's a whole big to do.
Wow. And
it's a public access station. So I mean, you're not going to get what you're going to get at an NBC. There's always some kind of technical difficulty. It's stressful. It's kind of catching up to me lately. And so I've been stepping back, just doing shows every other month. And I'm working on a documentary called From Late Night to Up Late. It's a behind-the-scenes look at the making of a public access show. So it's going to, if it gets done and we complete it, it's going to go into film. We want it to go into film festivals, and we want it on Amazon it will be done if it gets done.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything can happen where this project could just go in the can. But we already started working on it. And it's going to be like a pitch to the industry towards the end. It's going to be narrated. We don't have a narrator yet because it ain't the time to need one, but I've been looking for one that's going to be affordable. Someone that's good, like a name that has that like Early Jones type of Dick Clark type of narration that's going to sell it. You know what I mean? And then once the new year comes, I'm only going to do like 4 big shows a year. And I'm going to start working. I already started working with a promoter. We want to be putting shows out where we could go out into the public, like big restaurants, and do the late night show. Say like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin used to do in the restaurants.
Like live in front of people.
Live in front of people with the comedians and everything else. But I wouldn't do it unless I get a couple of promoters that are going to handle everything for me.
Right.
And that's the only way. And then the money will come in. I kind of went its course with the public access for me at my age now, because, as I said, it's a lot of stress. We can't. Public access, you have volunteers that come in. Say you guys had your show at my station. You're volunteers. I'm volunteers. I help you with your show. You guys come on my show. You help me with my show. There's nobody. The young generation can't get in. We can't get in. We bring them in. They don't finish orientation. And the ones that do, they have other aspirations. And back in the day, people loved that stuff. But because of you could do it home, you could do it in your car, you got the iPhone, you got all this stuff, they're like, why do I need to go into a TV station?
Right.
They don't know the nostalgic of a 8-track to a cassette to a record to a CD.
What's a record?
Yeah. I still spin records just to remember where I came from.
Well, records made a comeback.
They made a big comeback.
And they
have a lot of money now.
Yep.
From when you used to pay $7.99, $8.99 for one album, is $27.99 now.
At the low end.
Yeah, at the low end. Double albums are like $40, $45. So you better have a nice shopping bag when you go into one of these record stores. You buy one and you get one free. That's what we used to call it in the old school. So you rob one and then you buy one. You never rob something out of a store.
And then you return the one you robbed, right?
I shouldn't be saying this, but this is the Italian Sicilians do it better, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what I would have did back in the day, not now. Now I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Great movie.
But yeah, so that's where I'm at right now, guys. And the podcast.
Yes, we heard about that.
Give me that name again. I love the name.
It's called Breaking Balls with Johnny P. I'm I'm kind of lost with it, that's why I got turned on to you. You fine fellas, and I watched some of your stuff, and that's when I reached out to you, Frank, to be a guest. And I like watching people and seeing what they do, and what kept me away from doing a podcast is because I always believed is you got to have something different, or you're just filling up space with the other million people that are doing it. It's like, I got a podcast, I got a podcast, I got a podcast, I got a podcast. Everyone's got a podcast, I got a podcast. So it's like, what are you going to say to them?
It's a whole different animal, But we're proud to say, based on chartables.com, out of 2 million podcasters in the U.S. On all genres, we are top 1,000.
That's sick.
And on comedy and what was the other one?
It was regional.
Comedy and regional, we're top 600.
That's great.
So we're coming for you. But
you know what it is?
We have fun with it.
I look at it like this. You're looking at it like, what can I bring differently?
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's your personality. That'll really show you who likes you for you.
Yeah.
That's why it doesn't matter what you bring to the table. Like, I'm an idiot on here. He's mensa patata. But it doesn't matter. We put out ourselves. You're selling yourself. And honestly, that's the only way you're really going to make it. If people like who you are.
Yeah.
See? I think I'm funny as shit. I don't care if you don't think I am.
Yeah.
But I think I'm funny, and that's what I want to bring to the table.
And that's the attitude you got to have. And the owner, we film in the Phoenix Studios on Staten Island. Yep. Guy has and it's a commercial advertisement sponsorship place. So that's what kind of hooked me. But we had a couple of meetings, and it took a while for me to just say, you know what? It's the frustration of everything that I've been going through the last couple of years doing production, where it was kind of not being fun most of the time to me no more. I was just so used to the grind of it, because it's a grind doing the late night show. And I had a great time, and I still have fun the night of the show, but it's like a hamster wheel. If you don't keep that wheel going, you fall behind. So it's like, all my bookings are all advanced, and then I do last minute bookings, and I got standby. So after the show, I wait a week, I start editing. I don't let no one touch my editing. I do it all myself on Final Cut Pro. So it takes me anywhere from 10 to 18, 15, 20 hours to edit a show. If it goes over to an hour and 20, and you got a guy like, say, Federico Castelluccio was on my last show from The Sopranos, went to an hour and a half. So I edit it down for the streaming version to the best that I can, and I go over it and watch about 3-4 times until I say, okay, it's released. Then I'll put the extended version online. Then I gotta sizzle it down to 59 minutes. You know what a nightmare that is?
What do you cut?
You gotta really concentrate and say, what am I cutting?
Yeah.
And that's and I don't want to run late. Sometimes we just go and we want to get what these guys give. So from the editing to that, the coordination of the guests, the food, the sponsors,
right?
The run the studio. I got a lady who runs the studio audience, my public relations, Mary Rizzo. So it's a lot of work from not getting. We don't get paid because it's public access television, but I get the studio. That if I had to rent it, would cost me a lot of money in the city. I get all the people that work with me. I get Nucci's Restaurant sponsors us to give food to the all our crew and our guests. La Dolce's Bakery gives us all the pastries for just people who hang out. I got a photographer, Anthony, that works with us, and from the Wise Guy Show, you should get those guys on. They're good men. Freddie and Michael, good friends of mine. He does the photography for free. I got a makeup artist that comes from Queens. Her name is Aga. Professional makeup artist every month since the Big Ant Show in 2012, just to support the show. And this is what it takes. And with lower staff now, so besides being a producer and a host, I got to be a director. And it kind of sucks all my wind out of me, because when you get older, no matter how strong you are, young-hearted you are, you have to conserve your energy, especially when it's about to perform. Because then by the time you go on, you're winded.
Yeah.
And you're stressed.
It sounds exhausting, because it's not even just about, let's say, you trying to coordinate it. It's who's showing up, who could show up. And I'm sure like every time you shot, you were short somewhere.
99 out of 100% of the people made it.
Wow.
And I don't want to say his name, but people that know me, and they'll know it, I'll tell you guys later when we're off the air, because he's a friend of mine, well-known actor, who didn't make it, who last minute the day of, because he had a shoot, didn't know if he was going to get off, and I didn't make it. And a comedian, I could say this guy, Mike Buscemi. You know Mike?
Yeah.
Mike's a good friend of mine, sweetheart, but he has some health issues, so he last minute, like, Johnny, I can't make it. I go, oh, man, or Johnny, you know. But Mike gets a pass, but I told him, you can't be doing this all the time to me, because if I have your face on the flyer, I make flyers up. I make believe like
Plus you're ready.
I promote this thing like it's on like it's a real show, and technically, at the end of the day, I can never meet my potential to what I could do unless I get a union staff and a paid gig and a network or a streaming network. Then I can really come alive. The interviews are easy, but coming out with a monologue and I can't even use teleprompters because most of the times they don't work or they crap out. So you can't rely on them. So a lot of my monologues are improv when I should be going out there cracking jokes and everything. But since I'm so mentally tied and twisted with the whole thing, I can't do what I need to do, but it works. You know, I'm my own worst critic, say.
Yeah.
Everyone is, man.
Then you got to have the suit ready. You know, it's like, and we used to have, this is great. Like, you can't even make this up. Used to have guys that used to pick up the food. But then they would come later, they would be sick. So I said, you know, fuck yous all. Fuck yous all.
I'll do it all.
I'll do it everything. I'm going to be the jerk, the horse, and I'm going to show yous all. I'm old school, man. My father had a paintbrush in my hand at 8 years old. My father had me taking out the trash, weeding. These kids today, they don't even take out the trash. I'm not even, you know.
You're not lying, no.
And any parents out there, and you don't let your kid take out the trash and do the weeding and do the mowing the lawn, you can't blame them. It's you who have to do that. My father, forget about it. He gave me allowance, but I had to work for it. But my father used to bribe me when I got older. He'll come and listen, do this, and I throw you an extra $50. Okay, sure.
12 years old, I used to put the tin paint on the roof. What the fuck?
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question though. I know you don't have kids, but let's pretend you do. When we were growing up, we were outside all day long,
Loved it.
right? Either was we play baseball, we play handball, we were on the streets.
Manhunt.
Manhunt,
We used to throw tomatoes at cars.
eggs,
Yeah, eggs.
Halloween, right?
Yeah.
Shaving cream for Halloween, that's all over. But if you had to let your kid out today, would you?
Yeah.
With the people
I'd
and how
fucking
things
push
are.
him outside. I'd throw him out of the house and lock the door and say, you're not coming home till 6 o'clock.
When the lights turn off, get home.
You know, no, seriously.
No, because a lot of people's change. Like I'm actually one that was always in the street. I'm afraid to have my kids in the street now with the crap you hear.
You got to be careful. If you live close to town in a neighborhood, it's a good neighborhood, I would say, yeah. Like, I mean, when I was in Brooklyn, I was 8 years old walking down Avenue U, Kings Highway. I lived across the street from a park. And 9 years old, I remember going into 10 years old going into Crazy Eddie's, if you ever remember Crazy Eddie's. I bought my first Kiss album in there. And and we used to collect magazines. Like, that's what we did. If you had a favorite band or the Yankees or the Rangers, back then you bought baseball cards. Kiss had cards, you know. They had TV shows that had cards, comic books, you know, the cool shit. That's what we did. Go play in the park. We played handball.
Stickball.
Yeah, stickball, you know, all fireworks was huge. You know, all of that good stuff, man. I mean, I remember there was a time I got the crazy story. This is a crazy story. I was 10 years old. Like, we were talking about bringing them outside. There's always was sick people. I was 10 years old playing in Kelly Park. I was hanging out playing. Some guy came over to me and he was talking to me. He's like, hey, you play good. He goes, and then he said something. He goes, you want a blowjob?
Jesus Christ.
And I'm like, I didn't know what a blowjob was. I don't know, I'm maybe 9 years old.
Oh, Jesus.
Or 10 years old. But 10 years old, I don't even know if I knew for
Is that a lollipop?
what that meant. So I go, nah, it's okay. I just got a haircut the other day. Seriously, that's what I told the guy. That was a true story. But I told him a bunch of times. And he goes, no, I do good blowjobs. I go, no, don't worry about it. I go, I got a haircut. That's what I thought it was.
Jesus Christ.
So he goes, okay. And then I went home like a little while later. He goes, my father says, hey, how you doing? You had a good time? I go, yeah. He goes, what you doing? I goes, playing handball. I met this nice guy. I goes, oh, yeah. He goes, he wanted to give me a blowjob. And he goes, what?
Because yeah, Dad, but I cut my hair already, so I was good.
So I go, what you doing? I go, I told him I already got a haircut. I go, show me this guy. So we went out to the park. We lived across the street from the park. And we were like right across the street on Avenue S and 16th Street. So I go, there he is. He goes, hey, excuse me, come here. And then this guy just went. Whew. So my father started chasing him, but this guy ran so fast he never caught him. Yeah. So they brought me in the house and my mother. They made me take my pants down. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, take your pants. I go, no, what are you doing? And I was crying. And then my father, okay. And then my father told me, he pulled me in the back. He goes, I'm going to tell you, this is what, and he told me what it was. And I was crying. I was like, I'm sorry. He goes, no, you didn't do nothing. You did the right thing. And then that was it. But you talk about people being scared. There was always pedophiles, rapists, kidnappers.
Oh, yeah.
It's more now.
Because it's open on social media. It's more faster communicated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why I tell people, why do you show your kids? I mean, this is you should show your pictures, but it's scary. I don't know. I don't make no rules, but yeah, there was always sick people and people. We got our house robbed. I remember when I was 11 years old, we were out. My father was working. My mother came home. The place was turned apart.
Oh my God!
My Uncle Joe came over and he came with me. We and I was behind him. He had the bat, but yeah, like robbery, all that crap. You had to have you had to be rich to have an alarm in your house back in the 70s.
So you grew up in Brooklyn. How old were you till you moved out?
12 years old, and you're gonna love this story. 12 years old, we moved to Staten Island. I was miserable. I didn't want to go to Staten Island. One of my best friends that I'm still best friends with now, his name was Danny Calamine. Years later, became a cop, decorated detective, underground squad, when terrorists, everything. He's retired. Now he rides with the Widow Sons. They're a Freemason organization. Mm-hmm. Great guy, real American. Anyway, we used to do crazy shit back in Brooklyn, dare each other. So the last day we were leaving, there was this Jewish guy named Jaime who lived on East 17th Street. He used to get us in trouble all the time. So he was like, I dare you to break Jaime's window before you leave. I go, okay. So we're waiting till we were just about to leave. And my father's like, okay, go say your goodbyes, whatever it was. When went around the corner, got a half a brick, and I went, broke the guy's front bow window. I gave my friend a hug. I ran, got in the car. My father's like, come on, we're running late.
Off to Staten Island.
And we went to Staten Island. Jaime comes out. He's like, where is he?
That was his last day home. He's like,
they used to call me John. But I used to go there every other week to visit and stay for the weekend. My father was a fireman. When he used to work the weekend shifts, I used to stay at Danny's house or someone's house. So I used to have to run from Jaime every time I went there.
Jesus Christ. You tortured that guy then.
We tortured him. We used to throw balloons off the apartment buildings.
Water balloons?
Water balloons 20 feet high. We never hit people, but we used to scare people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I was a handful. But as you were saying with the breaking balls thing, and you're right, the guy who pitched me, guy Tony Hansen, who runs the studio, goes, I don't want you to be the talk show host. I want you to be the guy who you are every day, who we're hanging out with. You're ball busting. You're just, that's who I want you to bring. And it's a little hard for me because I'm still trying to get used to not having an audience. I'm so relaxed when I'm at this place that I'm kind of like in heaven.
Right.
No matter how good or bad I'm doing while I'm doing these episodes in the can, and there's no stress.
No.
You're still used to, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. And then finally you put on your suit, sit down, but now you just walk in.
I don't even have to wear a suit there.
Right.
I wear a nice, I could wear this, or I could wear, this is different, this is relaxed. But I could wear the hat, but I'm going to just wear a nice button shirt like I'm going out to eat. An Italian shirt, a soprano shirt, I call it. Something cool.
I'll give you mine. It'll be big on you.
All right. If you got anything, I'm extra large. So if you got anything extra large, I'll take.
So when are we expecting to see a first episode come out, more or less?
I don't know. We might throw a test one out because the Wise Guy, I put a couple of the guys from the Wise Guy show on, and they're doing an event in Atlantic City at resorts around Thanksgiving. So I think we're going to run that to promote them a week before it, just to throw it out there. He didn't even want to do that. He wants to do 10 to 15 episodes and put them in a bag, put them in the
best thing
in the bank. So I'm I'm a producer. He's a producer. I'm a producer as well. So they're even going to edit it when I haven't even edited it. I don't even have to edit it. So, but I'm so anal. I'm so going. I asked him. I go, can I view these with you? He goes, of course. Excuse me. Even if you want to edit them, you can. That's hilarious.
So before we say goodbye here, I kind of wanted to share with everybody. So Johnny came and gave me this. So Johnny, if you want to explain what this is,
that was me when life was good. Now that was an era when life was good, a decade, and every decade of mine, I have a good time. That was a good time. But that paper came out in 2004 because I was planning on coming back. I actually started up late night with Johnny P. early 2000, only did a couple episodes, and then I canned it because it was shit. That is just saying that I'm back, coming back with the late night show eventually, but one, I'm not coming back 3 years later. We always used to be followed around by the New York papers. So that's a write-up. But that picture was taken from a photo shoot for the album of MYB In Your Face in 2002.
Looks great.
But that was all, with all the ladies. Two of the girls I went out on, I dated a little. I didn't date them, but we hung out, what you guys would call it. We chilled.
Netflix and chilled.
And then one of the ladies on there, I dated the mother.
So he dated everybody here and their mothers. I want everybody to see that.
I don't want to say who and who. No, I only dated two of the girls there, hung out with, and then one of the girls that I didn't hang out with, me and the mother hung out with more than just hanging, but we didn't date.
That's awesome. Well, Johnny, I wanted to thank you for giving us the background. I want to wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate
with the shows. I'm looking forward to hearing the Breaking Balls.
Yes.
And
I'm glad that I met you guys. You gave me a smile on my face and let me reminisce. And everyone who's watching out there, this is like a first time thing. So I didn't really yap too much. But for people who don't know who I am, there's an old saying, you need a week to hang out with me to understand my personality. So, and I hope we're going to have more than a week to hang out with.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Why don't you let everybody know where they could find you on social media?
Okay. Well, let me see. Just johnnyptv.com. I have a website. Half of it works and half of it don't. I actually fired the guy who was doing it because he was slacking, taking my money and slacking. So I had to go give him his Shinebox record. Okay, Facebook, Instagram, Johnny Potenza on Facebook, Up Late with Johnny Potenza on Instagram. I don't do Twitter. Too political for me. And
well, it's X now.
It's X, yeah.
X.
Why do they call it X?
Who the hell knows anymore?
I have no idea.
And then that's it. I mean, I hope to see you guys sometime in the future, and God bless you, okay?
Guys, check him out. Give him a follow. He has big things coming. He's a man with 1,000 ideas. I see him taking this new podcast far.
Hope so.
Thank you guys for joining me. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.